Lanng. Supply chain payments company Tradeshift has announced it is raising $250 million in Series E funding, led by Goldman Sachs and PSP Investments. The new round brings Tradeshift's total funding to more than $400 million, valuing the company at $1.1 billion. This comes after the company launched a new service enabling blockchain-based finance. Tradeshift is basically a cloud platform for the supply chain. They describe it as Salesforce for the supply chain that is now offering a more transparent blockchain-based payment solution. Joining me now with more details, Tradeshift CEO Christian Lanng. So basically what you do, as I understand it, is you utilize blockchain to record all transactions in a sort of public ledger, which ensures more transparency in the supply chain process. Can you give me some specific examples of why this could be so transformative?
So I think if you think about supply chains, they're very complicated. They have many different partners working on a single product, typically multiple tiers down. So what we do at Tradeshift is we provide our customers with an end-to-end cloud platform to run everything that happens in your supply chain. Now, for a lot of scenarios, they actually need to collaborate with third parties or multi-stakeholder ecosystems where blockchain is a really good fit. So for all of those scenarios, we allow them to write the transactions to blockchain. They can collaborate, they can share data. For instance, if you have a certificate proving this has been produced in a sustainable way or free of carbon or whatever you want to do, you can then stamp those things to the blockchain, and all of the other partners around that piece of the ecosystem, they can see that data and they can have access to it without needing to opening all of your data, all of your books. So it allows people to collaborate much more efficiently.
Now, I've read that the accounts receivable market is like a $9 trillion market. How much of that could you potentially address?
So actually B2B is massive. For every single consumer transaction, there's around 9 B2B transactions. We move more than $500 billion in trade already. It's roughly the same as Amazon. So out of that $9 trillion market, just here in the US, it's $1.2 trillion that's right now outstanding in payments between companies. So if we can make that more efficient, if we can move capital faster, and if we can help people trade more efficiently, that's a massive opportunity.
Now, Goldman Sachs, now one of your investors. I was speaking with David Solomon a few months ago, president of Goldman Sachs, about blockchain and Bitcoin in particular. Take a listen to what he had to say.
We think blockchain, very, very interesting technology, but whether or not cryptocurrencies become a real store of value and how that all evolves, that's something we're going to watch very carefully.
Now, what I find interesting is that you don't actually accept cryptocurrency as a payment form. Isn't that kind of an oxymoron?
No, I actually think the potential for blockchain is in many other areas, especially as you look in business, than necessarily the crypto payments. Cryptocurrencies are not very stable means of payments. If you have a business, you want very stable currencies. This is the problem. I think the ability to coordinate large, complex ecosystems of people and companies is much more relevant. I think having transparency for financing, being able to write payables, for instance, so you can share them with your bank or your creditor, is much more important than necessarily moving currencies first when it comes to companies. I think we need to see a next generation of currencies that are far more stable before that's really relevant for the B2B side of the world.
Now, that's interesting because I also sat down with the CEO of Stripe recently, and the company had just stopped accepting Bitcoin as a form of payment. Take a listen to what Stripe CEO Patrick Collison told me.
It was trending towards being a digital store of value. I think that's a valuable thing to have exist in the world. I genuinely wish them the very best with that, right? It works less well for our use case. And this wasn't just kind of so much like a decision where we wanted to be the arbiter. We're just looking at the data, and it was declining rapidly in use as a payment method. If it starts increasing again as a payment method, then sure, great. We'll go back and we'll add it.
That is on an upcoming edition of Bloomberg Studio 1.0. And I had asked him, does he think that Stripe could be on the wrong side of history with this decision? I mean, do you think at some point there will be a cryptocurrency that is, works as a store of value, and will that be Bitcoin?
I think it's hard to imagine without, honestly, government backing to create some stability. I think, at least for large companies, if you're dealing with the Fortune 500, they want to make sure that the currencies they trade in are insured and are backed. And right now, I don't see Bitcoin being it. I think Bitcoin is just not efficient enough. That's another big problem. We run sometimes thousands of transactions per second. This is something the Bitcoin protocol can't handle right now. So again, I think there's many other use cases, but as an end-to-end problem, if I'm a Fortune 500 company, I need to handle a lot of different things in my supply chain, from logistics, sustainability, payments, trading, and Actually, the actual payment piece is a very small piece of that pie. There are much bigger problems like track and trace, knowing where my goods are, making sure that the consumer goods I put in front of consumers in China are coming from the right sources and have been healthily tracked all the way. Those are really, really big problems for business where I think blockchain will be applied before.
Now, there's a concern that you attach the term blockchain to any company and the valuation goes up, and some have suggested that your valuation wouldn't be sustained necessarily on the public markets. How do you respond to that?
I think, look, we are a very fast-growing SaaS company. Our valuation is backed by our revenues. Investors like Goldman Sachs, PSP, they're very savvy. I don't think they invest without making sure these things are where they need to be. We are very comparable with other companies that are trading right now. So I feel pretty good about where we are, and I think it's not like we attached blockchain and became a blockchain company. We've been working with global payment and transactions for the last 8 years. We have a very long track record of doing this. So it's not like we merged yesterday and just attached that. And our trade volumes are already, I think, if you look at the trade we do, it's bigger than Ethereum and Bitcoin combined. So I think we're not just like very quickly arriving on this. This is something we've been doing for a while.
What kind of competition do you have?
So I think in our space, it's not a massive amount of competition. I think we started early and we saw an opportunity in the market to really connect the dots in supply chain. And that has given us a big advantage. I think if you look at, there's a lot of niche players that do bits and pieces of this, just like there were before in the sales side, right? You had Salesforce emerging as a player that became a platform and an ecosystem, but you had these smaller players maybe doing the marketing automation or another piece, and we connected the dots.
So what else do you think blockchain will really revolutionize? I mean, payments is one thing we talk about a lot.
Yeah, so I just mentioned, I think track and trace, and that sounds trivial, but it's a massive problem for companies. Integrity of goods. If you look at something like customs, cross-border customs, it's a huge area. Logistics, every single logistics company in the world is looking at this. So I think these are the areas where there's the most benefit early. I think, as I said again, payments is actually a relatively trivial problem in business. It's a huge problem for consumers, but in business it's a relatively trivial problem.
All right, Christian Lanng, CEO and founder of Tradeshift. Thank you so much for stopping by.